Breaking news tonight, the new stay-at-home orders as cases surge past 200,000 in the U.S., the death toll rising toward 5,000, Florida and several more states bowing to pressure, joining most others in telling all residents to stay home. Deaths in New York alone soaring 25% in 24 hours, and the alarming number of sailors testing positive on that U.S. aircraft carrier, the captain pleading for help. Also, the troubling new alert about the government's national stockpile. New reporting that those reserves of masks, gloves, and other personal protective equipment have almost run out. Doctors and nurses still battling critical shortages on the front lines. Deadline day for many of those bills that have been piling up, while millions of Americans are out of work. What to do if you can't pay, and how to get help. The safety concerns over groceries and deliveries, how to avoid bringing the virus into your home along with them. The eye-opening report everyone needs to see. And the emotional reunion for our correspondent, who has reported extensively from coronavirus crisis zones, including inside China. Finally able to hug her son again after 49 days apart.
This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
Good evening, everyone. A new wave of states issuing stay-at-home orders tonight, finally recognizing the restrictive measures could be our best chance against this pandemic. Residents now in 39 states and Washington, D.C. under orders to stay inside, including Florida, where the governor has been under increasing pressure to act statewide as the virus took hold. The country tonight coming to grips with a grim prognosis as we approach what could be our darkest chapter in all of this. Our correspondents are in place again tonight, and Miguel Almaguer starts us off.
Breaking news tonight, the staggering numbers. The U.S. now tops 200,000 cases. And in the epicenter, the death toll in New York has almost quadrupled in 5 days. As Governor Cuomo closes playgrounds, he warns that social distancing is a matter of life and death.
Who else has to die for you to understand you have a responsibility in this?
And in Illinois, where the death toll is rising, we hear from a Chicago doctor on the front lines.
This is the most scared I've ever been being an ER doctor.
New stay-at-home orders. Florida's governor reverses course and tells the people of the Sunshine State to stay inside. What he thinks sparked the outbreak in Florida and why churches and synagogues are exempt. And tonight we talk to the nation's top infectious disease doctor, Anthony Fauci, about whether it's time for a nationwide shutdown. Sailors evacuate. After our interview with the defense secretary, what the Navy is doing to protect thousands aboard an aircraft carrier. Stockpile running out. Governors complain they're left to find their own medical supplies as the national stockpile is depleted. Community lifeline. The people still going to work to keep America fed. And tonight we end with this story. Love knows no bounds. A couple says I do in the era of social distancing.
This is the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell, reporting from the nation's capital.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. We begin with breaking news tonight. Florida's more than 21 million residents are the latest Americans now being ordered to stay home. After weeks of refusing to shut down his state, Governor Ron DeSantis says he is issuing the order, which starts tomorrow night because the president extended federal guidelines until the end of April. Now, the decision comes as cases nationwide continue to skyrocket. As we come on the air tonight, confirmed cases of coronavirus in the U.S. now top 200,000, doubling in 5 days. And more than 4,000 people have died in the U.S., about half of them in the state of New York, where the governor said today the outbreak may not peak there until the end of this month. Also tonight, Vice President Mike Pence is warning the U.S. is on the same trajectory as Italy. And there is growing concern about access to that protective medical equipment desperately needed in hospitals. We learned today the federal government's stockpile of masks and gloves is almost empty. Our team has every angle of this story covered. Mola Lenghi leads us off tonight from New York City, the epicenter of the crisis. And Mola, I understand we are learning that the governor's nightmare is coming true, that there are just 352 ICU beds left in the city.
Tonight, the staggering death toll across this country. More than 4,500 dead from coronavirus. In New York, now nearly 2,000 dead, an increase of 400 in just 24 hours. Tonight, the images from inside an ER in New York City. The ER full, the ICU full, patients in hallways. And now New York's governor warning the peak of this in New York City might not arrive until the end of this month, several more weeks. Tonight, the vice president and his alarming new words, with the world having seen what happened in Italy. Vice President Pence now saying the White House modeling suggests Italy may be the most comparable area to the U.S. And what President Trump said moments ago. Tonight, news from the hotspots emerging across this country, Michigan, Louisiana, Texas among them. And tonight, after weeks of resisting, Florida, now weeks into this, imposing stay-at-home restrictions. And the scene in California tonight, the pleas for help from the front lines. We also have new reporting coming in, ABC News obtaining the orders given to public and private EMS services in the New York City area. The paramedics answering these calls, and now an acknowledgement that near-death patients might not be able to be saved, with city hospitals overrun with coronavirus. What the guidelines now say for these crews on the front lines. Across the country tonight, the doctors who say even basic antibiotics are difficult to get. Another fearing he will have to deny ventilators to patients who need them. And the patients with pre-existing conditions, compromised immune systems. What one cancer patient says she was told if a choice has to be made. Tonight, the cruise ship headed toward Florida confirmed cases on board, at least 4 dead, including an American. And officials in Florida saying they don't want the ship to dock there. The dire need on board that U.S. aircraft carrier, cases now climbing to 93, and we have learned of new action tonight. The families across this country and the economic toll. The first of the month, bills due, and tonight the laid-off workers on the line for days trying to get unemployment. And that question about stimulus checks, do you need to apply or will they come automatically? We get answers tonight. And Dr. Jen Ashton with your questions. And tonight, the important headline for Americans 60 and older.
This is ABC World News Tonight with David Muir.
Good evening, and it's great to have you with us here on this Wednesday night. And tonight, the numbers now tell this story of a growing crisis here in the U.S.
Good evening, I'm Adrienne Arsenault. Tonight, anxious nurses tell us they're worried for their safety.
We need to be protected.
And the government acknowledges there's an equipment shortage.
I'm Andrew Chang. Also tonight, getting tougher on physical distancing.
We must absolutely implement stronger measures.
Why you'll be measuring your stay at home in months.
Very often we say, customer is number one, right? But I don't think in this case it's true.
The message from grocery store workers to socializing shoppers, enough's enough.
And on the 1st of this month, details about desperately needed federal funds.
Get ready to rehire people.
We'll explain how businesses get it, and our financial experts answer your questions. This is The National. As the global pandemic begins a 4th week, it is clearer than ever that Canada's collective ordeal has barely begun. The message from leaders today is that the call to stay isolated will likely continue for months.
So Andrew and I still keeping our distance, a measure more plainly necessary since we started doing it nearly 2 weeks ago. And like you, we'll keep it up as long as it takes. But how long will you be asked to confine your everyday life? Today, we're learning there's risk involved when leaders aren't clear on that question.
Tonight, Canada's pandemic path, the forecast, and the fear. The Canadian doctor who couldn't be saved.
He took care of tens of thousands of people for free.
As the losses climb in long-term care homes.
If we don't change our habits, it's going to be stark.
1,000 Americans die in one day.
We have 17 patients on respirators right now.
And the ruthless race for critical supplies.
It's criminal compared to what it should be.
Plus, the plywood portraits.
We need light and color and positivity.
An artistic homage to our healthcare heroes.
CTV National News with Lisa Laflamme.
Good evening. There's no way to ease into this tonight. There are now more than 1 million cases of coronavirus around the world. Canada is now well past the 10,000 mark, ending the day with over 11,000 people sick and 138 deaths. However, nearly 2,000 have recovered. There were also 1,552 new cases, the largest single-day increase so far. Heather Wright begins our coverage.
On this Wednesday night, preparing for a surge in patients. New hospitals, old facilities being repurposed. Why the next 2 weeks will be critical for Canada. New details on the federal wage subsidy, which businesses are eligible, when they'll get help, and who is still waiting. Mounting tales of heartbreak.
She died alone. We didn't even get to say bye to her.
Plus toughening measures across the U.S. An evolving debate, is it worth wearing a face mask in public? And the detective work of contact tracing. It is vital. Plus Canadian researchers racing to find treatments.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. Wartime language is now being used to describe the fight against COVID-19, an invisible enemy that has changed all our lives. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau calls it the greatest economic and health challenge since the Second World War. And the emergency aid plan being rolled out for individuals and businesses is the largest in Canadian history. The Prime Minister says it is the duty of every Canadian to do their part.